Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. Today, we are going to talk about major roadmap activities within FIWARE. This presentation doesn't intend to be exhaustive, just give you an overview about some of the roadmap activities that are guiding the evolution of FIWARE in different fronts. There will be dedicated webinars to all of the topics I will cover today. So that is also an invitation for you to stay tuned with the calendar of webinars that we are going to be publishing, because as I said, some of these topics will be covered in more detail within those sessions. All right. So let's see if this is working. Yeah, so the agenda of today is, well, I would like to start first with, by the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Juanjo Hierro. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of the FIWARE Foundation. And the agenda of today's webinar is going to be structured essentially in three parts. First, I would like to start with a bit of a reminder of some core concepts in FIWARE, because that may help to place all these roadmap activities into context. And then, which will be the core part of the webinar, I will be addressing a number of roadmap topics that are listed there, to conclude with a summary and a set of conclusions I believe are nice to have as a final summary of the session. Well, as I explained in the previous webinar about the FIWARE vision and value proposition, FIWARE gravitates around the notion of representing context using digital twins or context entities. Those, if I'm considering for example, as cities, might be the shops, the buses, the citizens, each of them characterized by attributes whose values change over time. And in a powered by FIWARE system, typically you keep always a digital twin representation of the real world by means of capturing data coming from different sources. It might be IoT sensors, might be robotic systems, might be third information systems you are connected to. And with this digital twin representation, which you will keep constantly updated, you will be performing the processing, analysis, monitoring that ultimately will bring support to the further automation of processes or the support of the smart decisions by the end users. This may in turn create an actuation, an update on the real world, and therefore within a sort of a constant feedback loop that provides the basic essential pattern of any powered by FIWARE solution. And this is a pattern that applies to cities, but also in agri-food or in manufacturing. Of course, entities being different with different attributes. Some of them might be common to the different domains. I may be talking about points of interest, and these might be relevant in smart cities, but also in agri-food, or if we are modeling weather as well. Yeah, so there are elements that might be common, others are specific of the domain, but generally we are following this pattern and this concept of a digital twin representation. Of course, energy is another sector where this pattern works. This digital twin, as I said, used to be representations of assets, might be assets that are connected to real world objects or concepts, like, for instance, a citizen's claim. If we talk about smart cities, they are characterized by attributes. Those attributes might be properties or relationships. And this is what actually help us to exploit information following a linked data approach. And those digital twin entities typically have a location and a set of these attributes, which may change over time quite dynamically in some cases. And context is overall the representation of a collection of digital twins. And as core element in FIWARE, the NGSI-LD provides the standard API that is really a genuine aspect of FIWARE, because such a standard API for digital twin information access didn't exist. And NGSI-LD will bring the possibility of creating portable, interoperable solutions, because it brings this API that allows, among other things, perform simple and complex queries, your queries, temporal operations, the ability to subscribe to get notifications, and even multiple renderings in when I capture and process responses. I will not spend that much time elaborating on this. There were this previous webinar I advise you to see and to watch if you haven't. And last week there was actually a full webinar focused on the details of NGSI-LD that our evangelist Jason Fox brought. So this could help you to dive in more in what I have explained so far. Remember, all our webinars are being placed and made available on the website. You go and click on events, and there is a place for Wednesday webinars where we are placing all these webinars. Also, of course, on YouTube in our channel. What is the FIWARE architecture? Again, gravitates around this vision that I was explaining, which, when I map into concrete elements, brings the context broker in the middle of whatever architecture. The context broker being the element that supports the NGSI-LD or NGSI version 2 API, to bring access to information describing the digital twins, also enabling to update that information. And around that, we bring a rich portfolio of components that enable to perform, on one hand, the ability to capture data from different sources to feed this digital twin representation. And there we have components that deal with the interface to IoT, robotics, third-party systems. On top of that, components for the processing, the analysis, the monitorization of data, and across all these elements, a number of components that enable to perform API management, security and access control on data, and last but not least, the ability to publish part of the data and monetize it. There are a number of components as part of FIWARE, as you know, and based on them and combining them, we create different kind of architectures. There will be a number of webinars where we will dive in more detail how these architectures may be designed. So I suggest to also stay tuned when these webinars will be scheduled. Not only for vertical solutions, we are going to talk about the architecture, but more complex systems of systems that are enabling to bring smart or to somehow transition organizations into smart organizations. We are available on GitHub, and talking about roadmap, one of the things I wanted to highlight in the call today is that for each and every component of FIWARE, you can see an element in the README of the corresponding repo, which is going to elaborate on the particular roadmap of that component. We are not going to go through all the components roadmap in this talk. I will elaborate on some lines of work where the community is working. But generally speaking, and I think this is important to highlight, you may take a look at the roadmap section of each component to understand what's coming next with regards to that component. So now going into the details about this vision and idea work streams connected to roadmap activities that the FIWARE community is doing. The first of them, the first which I think is important to highlight, is the support to NGSI-LD. There are many questions indeed coming from different members of the community or people that are following us, which are precisely asking, okay, when is NGSI-LD going to be supported overall within the FIWARE architecture? We know that there are a number of components that are already implementing NGSI-LD as a component, but we all know that everything will be much more powerful when all the pieces also support NGSI-LD. Okay, so that it was one of the first messages I wanted to bring on this talk. First of all, FIWARE is aiming at becoming the natural place where open source implementations of NGSI-LD can be found. I think this is a trend, and I think it's worth mentioning that 3 of the products that implement NGSI-LD are available on the FIWARE catalog. And that is also an open call and invitation to companies that have decided to come and develop their own implementation of NGSI-LD. If that is open source, definitely FIWARE is the place to be for you. 3 components already implementing this: Orion LD, which is the software that at certain point was created as a fork of Orion to develop fast a first alpha version and now beta version of the NGSI-LD implementation people could play with, which is planned to be merged with Orion. Secondly, Scorpio, and very recently a product called Stelio, developed by a company called eGlobalMarkt, that was contributed to FIWARE. And why this is somehow, from our perspective, the place to be for these product implementations? Well, because in many aspects, the needs and feedback from the FIWARE community is what is driving the incorporation of new functionalities in the NGSI-LD API specs. In that respect, the API specifications are still a live process. We are bringing new functionality based on the actual needs and the experience we are gaining using FIWARE in the different domains. I have mentioning here a number of functionalities that are going to be supported in at least Orion LD in the version that will be coming next September. Some of them are going to be quite relevant, as we will explain later on, for some domains like manufacturing, also for the creation of systems that might connect to maps and map representations and stuff like that. With respect to the rest of components, I'm happy to mention that there are quite many of them that will bring already support to NGSI-LD in the version, in the release that is going to be published in September. Plans are to make this release available during the FIWARE Summit that is planned, as you may know, by end of September. And here I'm mentioning some of the components that will be supporting NGSI-LD by then in the first place, and I believe this is quite relevant. IoT agents, and this is based on the fact that the IoT agent library available on IDAS will be supporting NGSI-LD. A number of context connectors will also be evolved to incorporate connection to context brokers based on NGSI-LD notifications. That will be the case of Signals, Draco, or Cosmos. And there are also some other components like those for visualization monitoring, and here referring specifically to Knowledge and WireCloud, that will bring support to NGSI-LD. There might be other components that as well will bring this compatibility. Also, I think it's worth mentioning there are some components that are somehow orthogonal to the API, to NGSI-LD API, so therefore there is not that much need for them to do anything special, because they are simply used together with NGSI-LD. That is what respect to the security components, to give an example. So those components will be by default compatible with the NGSI-LD as well. So this is one message regarding roadmap, which I think was important to mention, because definitely NGSI-LD is the path of how the different FIWARE, powered by FIWARE architectures, will be evolving, and therefore it was crucial to bring support to NGSI-LD along the whole suite of components that are part of FIWARE. The second aspect, and which is somehow connected to roadmap activities, I will not spend too much time on, because there will be a dedicated webinar for this, is the definition of the smart data models. So smart data models and the creation of the smart data models is an activity within the FIWARE community where we will spend significant effort. There is an initiative on GitHub. You have there the link, and you can simply search for smart data models on GitHub and you will find it, where we are together with TM Forum working towards creation of smart data models in different domains. We started with smart cities for obvious reasons, historical reasons, but is quite exciting how we are seeing that different organizations who have made a bet to use FIWARE in their domains, like water or energy or manufacturing or robotics, are really starting to contribute data models in this way, enriching this repository of data models. It's not about reinventing the wheel, creating models where there might already exist well-established de facto standards. In those cases, what we do is simply reflect how those data models would be represented in JSON-LD and in a JSON-LD rendering that is compatible with NGSI-LD. That makes those models ready to be used together with the API to bring support to the digital twin representation of objects in that particular domain. Let's now go into a bit specific topics that are also connected to the way FIWARE will be integrating with different technologies that in many cases are quite trendy, and then many people was asking themselves, okay, how is this going to connect with FIWARE and so on? And I would like to start first with blockchain distributed ledger technologies. And actually the integration of FIWARE and distributed ledger technologies is quite an amazing and a nice combination. Why? Because both technologies really complement each other. As you know, in blockchain distributed ledger technologies, the essential concept to start with is the concept of transaction, because transactions is what we store in the distributed ledger or in the blockchain. So what we are doing in FIWARE is there is a basic concept here about transaction we may want to store on the blockchain. That is the update on context on the state of the digital twins. So therefore, in powered by FIWARE architecture, there might be part of the transactions that might be stored on the distributed ledger. We don't need to store all the information about those updates, but this is also a nice aspect about how the two technologies might be complemented, which is the fact that then part of the information can be kept in the context broker or in the data sinks where history about context is being stored, to kind of bring some sort of off-chain storage support to blockchain. What is interesting of this is, on one side, blockchain distributed ledger technology brings to powered by FIWARE system the ability to register certain transactions in a way they cannot be changed. That is an essential concept of blockchain distributed ledger technology, so no rocket science there if you are familiar with the technology. And this may provide the basis for doing auditing of processes you may have automated using a powered by FIWARE system. That is useful for providing transparency on those processes, to be able to audit processes, perform forensics in processes when something strange has happened that you need to find out what meant. On the other hand, what FIWARE brings to a blockchain of distributed ledger technology is the ability to store data on the blockchain or distributed ledger that you can really rely on, because it's not fake. Because it's true that blockchain distributed ledger technology is a technology which, by definition, ensures that you cannot change what you have stored on the distributed ledger. But what if someone is storing their fake news or fake data? FIWARE may help to alleviate that problem. Why? Because FIWARE is precisely about automating the gathering of data and the harmonization of that data into a space and as part of the data transformation, and therefore you can bring a warranty that from the point in time where the data was generated until it got stored on the distributed ledger, there was no human intervention. And this is an essential basis for making sure that distributed ledger technology can become really meaningful and useful. What we are developing to make all this feasible is a number of, is a concrete component we call then Canis major adapter, which will essentially be able to subscribe to a context broker, the context broker that is calling your architecture, and capture notifications about given updates. Remember, I may not need to store everything on the blockchain, and using notifications on the context broker, I may decide to just select which attributes to are the ones that I want to store on the blockchain. So this adapter is capable to be configured to determine which attributes from which entities when you want to store. You might configure also this adapter so that it keeps these updates and kind of accumulate a set of them so that they are stored in a block and single transaction in the blockchain for performance reasons. And the interesting aspect also to highlight about this is that we are working towards bringing support to different kind of blockchain and distributed ledger technologies as storage distributed ledgers. So in the first approach, we plan to support enterprise Ethereum, JP Morgan Quorum, IOTA Tango, Hyperledger Vesu, Hyperledger Satoth, and the first version of this will be available in the upcoming release planned for September. So stay tuned, because from there you will have a quite useful instruments for creating solutions where you will be able to combine powered by FIWARE systems with distributed ledger technologies. And very nicely, one of the benefits is that you will be able to replace the distributed ledger technology. You will not be stick to a particular distributed ledger technology, because actually somehow what you are doing is you are automating the storage of certain updates. So actually you are hiding, in a way, access to the distributed layer through the NGSI-LD API. So in a way, also deciding or relying on an API that will preserve your independency from the particular distributed ledger technology. So here, I think more or less I have explained what would be the communication flow, but this presentation will be later made available on the website, and you will be able to dive in a bit on what are the specific steps that in the communication flow will take place using this blockchain adapter. This paves the way for creating architectures where we will bring blockchain. If we think about the smart cities, to give an example, this can be used for supporting transparency of processes by the city, by the administration, for For example, when a given citizen opens a claim, this can be something, a transaction, an update on context. You may decide to register on the blockchain. This will be allowing you to handle in a transparent manner how the issues with the city were being tackled and managed. There is other work underway. We are also exploring the other way around. There might be certain systems that are already natively storing data on the distributed ledger, but you may want to leverage on the ability to get part of this data and made it also available on the FIWARE space. This will be useful, for instance, if you were planning to perform certain AI processing or big data analysis, and therefore, by means of transferring or translating part of the data that is on the blockchain into FIWARE space, you will be able to combine and process that data using the rich portfolio of components that FIWARE brings. Last but not least, but this is a bit more longer term, we are considering or may wish to experiment what would mean storing, using a distributed ledger as the native storage of a given context broker implementation of the NGSI-LD API. This doesn't mean that such kind of context broker would be the recommended approach, but there might be certain part of the context information you may want to natively store on a distributed ledger, and therefore this could be something meaningful for you. So stay tuned and check what will be these developments, and we will be keeping you updated. Of course, and this is also something that I want to comment overall, feel free to contact us if you want to learn more about any specific topic or get involved in the developments and the work that is taking place, because actually it is about creating a community around these concepts and these topics to further evolve and enlarge the ecosystem. Also, if you have some questions, we will be able to answer them at the end of this webinar. We will devote some minutes to answer some questions. Please drop them on the chat so I can then later, when I finish the presentation, go through some of the questions and try to answer them. Second area I wanted to cover was interface to robotics. What is a bit the status and the short, medium term roadmap? We have already a number of agents that are available that you can use to make data linked to robots be available as context data and actually be able to represent those robots and robotic systems using entities of different kind. On the first place, I want to highlight the availability of the OptiCUA IoT agent that is available already and being used in different projects. We have the FIROS component, which enables to support an interface between ROS-based systems and the context broker. And the idea or the concept that I wanted to introduce is that we are currently developing a new bridge that will help to connect ROS2 systems properly with the context broker. This is based on existing libraries, the server operating systems library for SOSS library that enables to create different kind of gateways with ROS2 based systems. And leveraging on this library, we will create an agent that therefore can be used whenever you have a robotics system based on ROS2. That is kind of the short medium term. In the long term, one of the ideas that we want to support and where we are working on is the idea of supporting NGSI as an API, not just with the RESTful binding that exists today, and which is the NGSI-LD a RESTful API, but also seeking to bring support to the concept of the API and in some protocols like OPC UA or DDS. So that's why we consider here OPC UA bindings and DDS bindings. This would mean that in a context broker that in the future may support these bindings, you would be able to get access to attributes of a given entity using the RESTful API, but at the same time, you may get access to the same attributes using either an OPC UA API or a DDS API. This will be something useful in terms of performance, and may help also to create a more efficient integration with robots that are supporting natively these protocols, and is one of the certainly lines of activities in which we are planning to spend some efforts. It's something that is a bit challenging. We need to understand how concepts in NGSI, the notion of entity, properties, relationships, and so on, would map into the underlying concepts that might be connected to OPC UA or DDS, which are in principle different paradigms, but we will try to find out what could be the mapping of the concepts in each of the elements. NGSI, we understand, has a potential of being abstract in many of the concepts that are supported. So therefore, we will we will be moving towards being able to support in the context broker product, particularly in Orion, the different APIs and not just RESTful APIs. One concept that I think is worth mentioning is that in the release of September, there is the intent that one of the features of NGSI-LD, which will be the support of low-level protocol data stream notifications, be supported with at least DDS. What does this mean in NGSI-LD? And this will be part soon of the standard. You will be able to subscribe to certain changes on context, on, for instance, values of attributes of given entities, and you will be able to subscribe specifying that the values that will be notified for each and every change will be submitted to you using a protocol that is not REST, but a more efficient protocol, like it could be MQTT, or it could be DDS or OPC UA. And it will be also submitted to you as a stream of data. So not as it happens today with regular notifications, where every notification is a request, where the context broker is through a request sending data to a particular destination. This will be something that will allow for a given robotic systems. Here we have in the example a palletizer to both export an NGSI interface in RESTful mode, which might be enough for the kind of integration you will perform at higher levels when combining different robotic systems in a production line, for instance, but will allow you in parallel to be, for instance, submitting as a stream of data real fast data to other systems, sending to them low-level data about different parts of your robotic systems. This will be helpful, for instance, where connecting your robotic systems with systems that allow a 3D digital twin representation and simulation of your robotic system. And definitely, we believe this will allow some of these systems to really connect much faster than they are doing nowadays. This will be useful for creating digital twin connection with 3D digital twin modelers and tools for visualization. We are also intending to do some develop some components with some open source frameworks for 3D visualization of robotic systems, and all this we plan to make it available as part of FIWARE. Of course, the vision is that of once I have agents that are capable to interact with the different robots, and once I'm able to bring a standard interface that expose the basic capabilities and configuration aspects of a given robotic systems, FIWARE will bring the opportunity to integrate different robots to perform more complex collaborative processes with the final intent of integrating robots and making them context aware. What these will require and will be part of the roadmap activities, and there are a number of projects in which we are working in that direction. It will mean that we will define standard interface for certain kind of robotic systems that could be reusable in different production lines. Think about AGV robots and robot fleets management systems. Think about palletizers, depalletizer systems, and systems like this, which the whole idea would be to be able to standardize what kind of NGSI interface they may provide, and therefore can be used together to solve specific problems. Also combining not just the different robots in that process with their corresponding interface, but also being able to integrate data from more traditional sensors that may exist, for instance, in a subfloor. This way, creating a more intelligent behavior and further automation of processes in factories. I talk about factories, but in a way also these kind of systems in the future we envision may be translated to other spaces, like buildings, smart buildings, when we talk about robots dealing with surveillance of the infrastructures, or even also, why not in the future, at home. As a third and final level of enlargement of the vision regarding robotics, we are working towards the notion of developing manufacturing execution systems based on FIWARE. Here the vision is that of modeling not only the systems that are part of the shop floor, which might be the machines, which might be the robots, and model their interfaces and bring a digital twin representation of the shop floor that is fully managed through NGSI, but also be able to integrate data and information coming from third systems like the ERPs of the factory, the systems that are dealing with the demand, dynamic demand planning, or warehouse management, all together bringing information and creating that digital twin representation that may help to support manufacturing execution system functionalities on top of that, leveraging on the ability to integrate and components that may perform processing based on big data and AI technologies, or use advanced dashboard monitoring tools, and so on. Third element, vertical, where we are also focusing part of our work and roadmap activities is making progress on all the data marketplace elements within the FIWARE suite. These are already components that exist and are part of FIWARE. We all know that the fact that we may use a common context digital twin information management API across different domains opens the opportunity to bring support to a full set of a new wide range of innovative services based on data economy concepts, where of course you may need a common framework for authorization and access control on data, but where different organizations may expose part of the data under certain terms and conditions and ask for a payment for usage of the data. These are elements we are bringing support to by means of a number of components that are part of FIWARE. I enumerate here essentially which are those components. Part of them are basically linked to the security framework. The last four that are mentioned in this list have to do precisely with that, but there are others on top that are available and used for this purpose. The part more focused on marketplace pricing are components that already exist and are available and are enabling creation of marketplace data marketplaces today. But one of the aspects that there are two aspects in which we are approaching the roadmap and evolution of these components. First of all, these components were relying on TM Forum Business Ecosystem Open APIs, but that was a little bit old version of these APIs, which has been updated, and the whole idea would be that of updating the components to be based on the latest version of the API. I will not go into the detail about what will be the marketplace functions supported on top of that, because this is not something that changed. It is an update on the API essentially. But and second element I want to mention is that we are working together with the IOTA Foundation towards being able to integrate so that part of the information that is managed through these marketplace and business support components within FIWARE can leverage on the IOTA Tangle. What are the kind of information we plan to store there? On one side, the different policies linked to defined terms and conditions, but also an essential element that is later on critical for settlement and payments, which would be the record of actual charging data records, the storage of charging data records. This is something we believe has quite a potential base to be stored on the IOTA Tangle. And there will be a webinar focused on the description of what is the target architecture for this new version of this set of components that we are planning. And hopefully also in the release of FIWARE that is coming in September, it will be part of it and can be used. We are preparing some great and exciting announcements connected to this. There is some diagrams that I was bringing here to elaborate a bit on how the different components of the architecture may work together. And but as I said, there will be a dedicated webinar focused on this. And in any case, the slides of this presentation will be available for you. The last point about the roadmap I wanted to elaborate about is on the idea of creating big data AI service marketplaces. The whole vision is that of creating big data and AI services which might be provided as a service, plug and play, connectable into consumer applications, of course, that are expected to be powered by FIWARE. And the whole idea is that these kind of services, in a sense, are about injecting data from the applications and getting results through some given interface. And well, how we can develop the vision of making them plug and play. Well, if there is a paradigm of plug and play that we all know is Lego. And if we think about how Lego works, is because it relies on a number of the standards, and standards that are fulfilled by each of the pieces, and which warrants you that the different pieces can be plug and play together. So there is nothing that is different here. The pieces that I'm trying to connect, which are these AI big data services that are that would be available in a marketplace, and I need to connect into my architecture, will be relying on a concrete set of standards. On one side, the API for data integration, the data models to be used, and the security framework. And they have to be standard, and if we want to really make them to work. What is the vision that we have is of course, as you could imagine, the idea that this data integration API, not only for the injection of data into the AI services or big data services, would be NGSI-LD. And not only that the data models that to be used will be relying on the common smart data models we will be defined, but also supporting a common security framework for this kind of plug and play services, where we can leverage on the standard components that already exist, standard-based components that already exist as part of FIWARE. But we are also working together with IDSA Association in bringing support to some more advanced components supporting usage control, leveraging on the concept of IDS connector. The whole vision is that being able to have all these kind of AI services or big data services in a marketplace, That marketplace can be developed based on the marketplace components I mentioned before. We would be, in that respect, going beyond data marketplaces and really being able to support marketplaces of plug-and-play AI services and big data services. What I would standardize as a template for each of these services that are going to be exposed is, on one side, the data model that such services are able to consume and are also able to comply with at the time of providing results, the terms and conditions for the use, and as default and assume as default, these AI services will be able to capture the data and establish interface with the applications that want to plug and play these services using NGSI-LD, and in combination with the security framework, which will enforce the defined terms and conditions published together with the AI service or big data service on this marketplace. This is a quite advanced concept in which we will be working. There are a couple of projects that are going to help and to develop the vision, but yes, it's something on which we are going to work. Now to final slides to conclude, and then we may spend a few minutes on questions. Know that it has taken a bit more time than expected, but as you can see, quite a lot of content to deal with. But kind of summarizing, the whole idea is, well, we know and we explained in the previous webinar that FIWARE brings a way to materialize the concept of digital twin, and precisely around that vision, we are being able to integrate multiple technologies, not just the ones that we were already integrating in FIWARE, but new technologies like blockchain, light robotic systems, and all in summary, also bringing the capability to expose data, monetize data elements, and also supporting the concept of marketplace of plug-and-play big data AI services. All of these concepts, all this way to integrate the different technologies, put them at the service of application providers, developers who want to create the smart solutions of the future, is what we are working on and concentrating our efforts in with regards to roadmap activities. This vision will be the basis for creating smart vertical solutions, but also why and how we are going to support the transition of full organizations into smart organizations. And all these topics together will be the subject of several of the webinars that will be planned in the coming months.